This video is brought to you by Straight Goods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit straightgoods.ca.
Under Mr. Harper's leadership, Canada has gone from being a paragon of virtue with respect to our commitments to international law, international diplomacy, international engagement, and environmental leadership, to becoming now a pariah. So we've gone, in a sense, from Pearson to pariah in a single bound, with the Government of Canada's decision to abandon its participation and willingness to accept an international framework that was found in Kyoto. There's something, I think, fundamentally dishonest about the way the government has handled this. It was widely reported 2 or 3 weeks ago that this was going to happen. The government hemmed and hawed and did not want to address the question and went into the Durban conference in complete bad faith. There's no other way to describe it. They went in with without having the courtesy or the courage to say we're pulling out of this entire process. And I think that the way the government has handled this issue is reprehensible. It goes from the time when Mr. Harper described it as a socialist plot to a whole decade of denial by the Conservative Party that climate change was even an issue. Their first act in government was to tear up the Green Plan, which had been contained in 2 of Mr. Goodale's budgets, which the Pembina Institute said would have gotten us to 80% of our targets. But frankly, for those of us who've been watching this government, it unfortunately does not come as a dramatic surprise. This is a government that is marked by excessive partisanship, a narrow-minded ideology, an attempt to control the agenda of Parliament without consultation, without discussion. And although the government has pretended that it was the economy all along that has been its preoccupation, and that in fact it's the economy that they wanted to drive their activities, in fact the facts tell us something very different. They've not been focusing on the economy this fall. They've been focusing on issues that are of frankly secondary importance to Canadians, that are not top of mind for Canadians. The top of mind issue for Canadians is jobs and work. It is the economy. It's health care. These are the issues that dominate. Conservatives have been playing with their majority power to shut down debate and to turn out the lights on Canadians. For Liberals, it's taken a lot of work to get some work, taken a lot of work just to get something done for Canadians. Withstanding the rhetoric and ideology of a Conservative majority has been, I don't mind saying, from time to time a little frustrating, and yet it is an endeavor that we commit ourselves to on behalf of Canadians.
Simply put, Stephen Harper is using time allocation differently than any other Prime Minister. Nothing illustrates this point more clearly than the 7 times bills were put to time allocation before the end of the first day of debate. Compare that to the previous majority government when this happened on only 2 occasions within the entire 419 sitting days. Next slide. The purpose of Stephen Harper's unprecedented abuse of time allocation is to avoid debate on controversial bills where his government finds few allies. Whenever a committee broaches a topic that could shed light on Harper's misuse of public funds for the G8 or the effects of its austerity measures on veterans or its crusade against the CBC, they closed the door on prime.
Not only to Kyoto, but to a number of other initiatives which signaled the level and degree of our international commitment. This is the first time in our history that we pulled out of an international treaty of which we were a signatory, a treaty which was ratified by Parliament, you know, I think an objective assessment of the facts would say that the budgets which Mr. Goodale presented in 2004 and 5 would have, according to the Pembina Institute itself, led us to 80% of reaching our goals by 2012. That was, just like Kelowna, which Mr. Harper canceled in 2006, those were 2 major initiatives of the Martin government, which I think every observer would have said would have made an enormous difference to the lives of Aboriginal people in the case of Kelowna, and would have taken us a long way to achieve the Kyoto target.
Globe and Mail. But with due respect, Mr. Rae, we sort of have seen a little bit of a government like this in the past, because not that long ago, the Conservative government prorogued Parliament for no apparent reason, killed bills in the Senate that had been passed in the House, filibustered committees that didn't seem to be going their own way, broke their own election laws, and yet Canadians not only voted for them again, they voted for them and gave them majority government. So do Canadians really even care about this? I mean, you're sitting here giving us, you know, democratic issues, but do Canadians really even care?
Well, I think, you know, it is, this is one party and this is one opposition, and if I may say so, this is one leader, even on an interim basis, who is not going to lie down and die on these issues. It is too important. Canadians deserve to know the kind of government that they have, and a government that treats Parliament this way is a government that ultimately will treat its citizens this way. And that, I think, is something that everybody has to understand.
A government that does this to Parliament would do it to Canadians. What would that look like? I think people feel that what happens here is just so removed from their daily lives anyway. What would a government that's doing this to Canadians look like? What do you think is in peril in ordinary citizens' lives?
Well, I think, I mean, one thing is very clear is the cuts that are coming down the line are very ideologically driven. The cuts that are coming down the line in terms of services, the cuts that are being made to employment insurances offices in Atlantic Canada, the extent to which Atlantic Canada, for example, is being hammered much harder than other parts of the country, even from these preliminary cuts. The elimination of science, I mean, you can't explain, you know, we'll see what happens in the departments of transportation and elsewhere, but in terms of the Environment Commissioner's report today, even with the current establishment at those departments, they're not able to enforce the laws that they're supposed to be able to enforce. Imagine what it's going to be like when we don't have inspectors, when we don't have auditors, we don't have people who are supposed to be doing that work. There is another question, though, and I guess I'm going to go perhaps a little further than some would like me to go. We rely on governments to respect information. We rely on governments to respect the due process of law. Citizens give up a lot of their rights in order to give information to people. If you condone telling lies and making phone calls into somebody's riding and playing those games, what would stop you from being similarly abusive in situations where you're keeping confidential information? I dearly hope it's not happening, but I can only tell you, if you don't stop this rot, if the Prime Minister doesn't say there's something very wrong when parties are doing this, he doesn't stop that rot, then I think there's a risk that the rot ends up affecting all of government, and it's very unhealthy.